very serious disease that these players are getting while they're playing that slowly manifests and changes and progresses over time. So it's important we study this, and we also understand the link with suicide, which right now we don't know. Interestingly, NFL players have a lower risk of suicide than the population. So this study highlighting that many have had thoughts of suicide has not led to an increase in suicide for the 15 years that we've been talking about suicide. The big takeaway from this study is, and the lesson from this study, is that NFL players who are concerned about CTE do need to get help and get treatment. The symptoms that they're having today may be treatable. A lot of the problems with cognition could be caused by, for example, sleep apnea issues or pain intolerance issues. There's all sorts of other possible treatable causes. So we are constantly messaging to former NFL players and former football players, if you're concerned, we can't tell you whether or not you have the disease, but we can tell you a good doctor can help you live better while we try to figure out better ways to diagnose this in living people and to treat it.
And let's also talk prevention, because players have the option of wearing Guardian caps, which fit over the helmet and offer some added protection against concussion. Do you think the NFL should mandate their use?
No, I don't think the NFL should yet mandate their use. There has not been a published study yet on the Guardian caps that NFL players are wearing. They're a different type of cap than is being sold at colleges and high schools. So without any published data and only 2 years of use, there's no way we should be mandating something that adds nearly a pound of weight to the helmet and can actually cause other problems. The reality is, another way to look at this study is the idea that the stress of being concerned about CTE is real, right? Like, so I'm somebody who played college football. I'm concerned about CT as well. And so knowing that in your 20s you did something, or your teens, that can affect the rest of your life is something that we should be trying much harder to prevent, not just at the NFL level, but all levels of football.
So what else do you want to see the NFL do here?
Well, the reality is the NFL is making some really great changes. I like the new kickoff. I like the idea that we need to do better with helmets. But the other point that needs to be made is changing the last few years of a football player's 15 to 20-year career, making them safer, is not necessarily going to change CT outcomes 10, 20, 30 years down the road. If the commitment to safety that the NFL is making is not pushed down all the way through football, we're just going to continue to have this problem never be solved. The two biggest changes that need to happen throughout the football ecosystem is kids probably should not be tackling young and getting hundreds of hits to the head while their brain's developing. So probably no tackle until 12 or 14. And then we should not be hitting in practice. We still have in college football 2 out of every 3 head impacts happening in practice, which is crazy now that we know what these head impacts do. The NFL is not taking a position on youth football. In fact, they're still recruiting children to youth tackle football. So if they continue to do that, we'll continue to have this problem.
Wow, 2 out of 3 head hits happen in practice. That's an interesting fact. Co-founder, CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, Chris Nowinski. Chris, thank you.
Thank you.
And a new legal battle brought by the state of California is raising some questions about recycled plastics. The multi-billion-dollar suit claims Exxon engaged in a, quote, decades-long campaign to make customers believe all plastic bags can be recycled. Exxon's fighting back, saying California's system has always been flawed. ABC's Lionel Moise is breaking it down.
It's time ExxonMobil is held accountable.
California is suing ExxonMobil, claiming for nearly half a century the company has deceived the public about whether plastics are recyclable. The lawsuit claims Exxon, which produces a key component in single-use plastics, pushed misleading claims that these materials could be easily recycled, leading to widespread environmental damage.
Tell people that it's their responsibility, that they have the burden of recycling, and if there's plastic pollution, it's because they failed to recycle, and it was all a sham.
The suit claims Exxon promoted the widely used chasing arrow recycling symbol, leading buyers to believe products with the symbol would be recycled if disposed of properly. But a study in 2022 found only about 5% of plastic waste in the U.S. is actually recycled, the rest being incinerated or sent to a landfill.
You can have an item with chasing arrows and it is completely not recyclable. It'll end up being incinerated in the environment or in landfill.
ExxonMobil responding, saying for decades, California officials have known their recycling system isn't effective. They failed to act, and now they seek to blame others. Instead of suing us, they could have worked with us to fix the problem. The company says so-called advanced recycling, which uses chemicals and heat to break plastics down for reuse, is effective and has kept 60 million pounds of plastic waste out of landfills, but environmentalists criticize the process as inefficient.
Our thanks to Lionel Moise for that. California is seeking a jury trial and damages that could amount to billions of dollars. Coming up, new music from Lady Gaga, what the Mother Monster teased on her Instagram that has fans in a frenzy.
It's lunchtime in America, so what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
Your health, your money, breaking news, pop culture, with the biggest stars, music, trends, and of course, good food.
It's all coming up on GMA3.
You're going to love it. We'll see you then.
GMA3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us afternoons.
For everything you need to know.
I love that.
Me too.
She had this captivating smile and these beautiful eyes, and I prayed that they would find her alive.
Her car was found abandoned.
You find keys in this car that don't seem to belong to her.
That was just the beginning.
Oh my God.
A local woman who says she sometimes has visions.
I could see blood.
I get goosebumps. This case touched you like no other had. Why?
Because I know how much black girls don't matter.
All new 2020 Friday night on ABC. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
Baywatch is a fantasy.
Baywatch was sexy.
Jason Momoa exploded.
Carmen was a bombshell.
Pamela Anderson was an icon.
Greed, lust, fame.
Everyone likes to watch sexy things.
Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, Shohei Ohtani, legends of the game. But now the list of greats redefined. From ABC News, Reclaim the Forgotten League, a side of the story of baseball you have never heard before like this. The award-winning podcast is back. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or scan the QR codes you see here.
I'm Jacqueline Lee on the red carpet for the 76th Primetime Emmy Awards. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Welcome back to ABC News Live. First, that music means it's time for the tea, where we break down some of the buzzy stories people are talking about. Our friend Will Gans is here to help us out. Will, is the tea hot today?
Okay, I'm noticing for the first time that your mug of tea is bigger than mine. I don't know what that means. I still have plenty of tea to spill, people, but, you know. This is
I have
what we're
faith in
working
you.
with. All right, thank you. Brace yourselves, everybody, for new Lady Gaga music. After posting cryptic teasers on her Instagram account and promoting a, quote, surprise project in a recent Vogue interview, billboards have been popping up in Los Angeles and New York City that say, Lady Gaga 6.5, okay? So that means that this is not gonna be her 7th studio album that fans have been expecting, that comes in February, nor a callback to her 6th album, Chromatica, but something in between. Online fan theories suggest that this project will be tied to her role in Joker Folie à Deux. Some even think the album might be called Harlequin, which of course would be a reference to her character in the film, which hits theaters next week. But this is imminent, like it's gonna happen before next Friday. New Gaga music.
Sort of.
Sort of.
Half.
A concept album. So it's like not what Lady Gaga, Stephanie Germanotta wants to share as an artist, but what Harley Quinn would want to share.
This is very meta.
It's very meta. It's very Gaga, you know?
It is very Gaga.
All right, call me Central Perk, because the tea I'm serving up this morning is the kind that Rachel, Monica, Phoebe, Ross, Chandler, and Joey would love. Friends is getting its own game show as part of the iconic sitcom's 30th anniversary. The show is called Fast Friends and will film right here in New York City. According to the show's description, contestants will, quote, relive their favorite moments while being put to the test with trivia, puzzles, and games, and the quickest team will win the title of Ultimate Friends Fan. It will premiere on HBO streaming service Max. No word on when, but until then, I guess we were on a break.
We were on a break.
Pivot.
Pivot.
Pivot. Okay, so that was our audition for the game show. In case anyone was wondering, Diane and I are ready.
Fired before they even hired us.
All right, we're gonna pivot to the next story here. Next to one of the most anticipated films of the year, dropping a new trailer and major bombshells within that trailer. Take a look.
I own you now. But whose head could I give you to satisfy your fury?
The general will do. Rome has taken everything from me. But I will have my vengeance.
Ooh, the trailer goes on to reveal that Paul Mescal plays the son of Maximus, which you'll remember was Russell Crowe's character in the original Academy Award-winning film Gladiator. This sequel, Gladiator 2, hits theaters November 22nd. And the other big trailer out this morning is for Thunderbolts from our parent company Disney. Florence Pugh leads a team of Marvel anti-heroes, including Sebastian Stan and David Harbour from Stranger Things. Thunderbolts comes out next May.
Really nice.
I love that like Marvel movies now are just like Academy Award winners, Emmy Award winners, Golden Globe winners. Like it's like the quality
It's hardcore.
It's hardcore. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is in it too.
Also, fun fact, at Boston College, back when we had landlines, you used to call and get an automated message of who you just reached, and mine said, "My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius." Huge Gladiator fan, very excited for the sequel.
Okay, so wait, but it comes out the same day as Wicked. How are you gonna navigate that?
Doubleheader.
A doubleheader. I love it. All right, finally, the Beehive is bracing itself for Beyonce's next big project. Not music, unfortunately, but it does give us an excuse to play her music.
The death toll is rising in Lebanon. The Lebanese Ministry of Public Health. That was not the right sound. We will get the right one. Apologies for that. But let's talk about Beyonce.
Yes, the incredible collaboration with Post Malone from her Cowboy Carter album, Levi's Jeans. It may soon be more than just lyrics to a song. The denim brand posting this artwork on Instagram with the caption, "Introducing a new chapter." Fans speculating that a collaboration with Cowboy Carter herself is coming soon. For now, though, it's all speculation, although Levi's did tag Beyonce in that post, so that seems like more than speculation to me.
You're considering that confirmation, loose confirmation.
According to my journalistic duties here, a tag on Instagram is confirmation, people. That's all Will Gans. That's not ABC
Correct,
News.
correct. All right, still speculation, but speculation that's fun to chat about.
Hopefully next time you see me, I'll be decked out in Beyonce jeans.
There we go. Will Gans, thank you, friend.
Thanks, Diane.
And thank you for watching. I'm Diane Macedo. The news never stops, and neither do we. You can find ABC News Live anywhere you stream live news, on the ABC News app or on abcnews.com. And we have a lot more news for you right after the break. Stick around.
Now we have a little fun.
It's showtime. Everything has led to this moment.
Now we have everything we need.
No, not everything.
You get a free demon possession with every exorcism. That's right, Lydia.
Mom.
31 Nights of Halloween. Watch all October on Freeform.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Start Here. September 28th, it's the Global Citizen Festival in Central Park. Coming together to support some of the most important issues of our time with performances by Post Malone, Doja Cat, Lisa, Jelly Roll, Rauw Alejandro, Benson Boone, Ray, hosted by Hugh Jackman. Saturday, streaming on ABC News Live, Hulu, and Disney+.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families.
On the ground in Ukraine.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Reporting on the historic flooding in Carolina Beach, I'm Faith Abube. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Hey, good morning, America. Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? They are ready.
covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning.
You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
I'll be here.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Michael, George, Clara, Ginger.
Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. Let's get right to our top story. President Biden is set to give his final speech to world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly any minute. He's expected to tout his administration's work to rebuild alliances and reestablish American leadership on the world stage. But the two wars that started under his administration have no clear end in sight, and Israel's conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon appears to be escalating quickly. We have team coverage. Let's bring in senior White House correspondent Selena Wang, ABC's Patrick Reevell, and foreign correspondent Tom Sufi Burridge in Tel Aviv for more. Selena, a senior administration official says that the president will do what he has done throughout his presidency, rally global action to tackle some of our world's biggest challenges. What does that look like? What can we expect to hear from the president today?
Well, Diane, this is going to be President Biden's final address to the UN, and he's going to see this as a sort of farewell speech and a chance to burnish his legacy. So he's going to spend some time talking about his accomplishments, and that's going to focus on rebuilding American leadership on the global stage and rebuilding American alliances. But of course, looming over all of this is the fact that two wars that started under his administration are still raging with no clear end in sight, and now with the risk of a wider war in the Middle East perhaps greater than ever. So President Biden is going to need to address those issues. That's going to be looming over all of those conversations on the sidelines as well. And despite the fact that President Biden, and he will likely reiterate that again today, has said repeatedly that the goal, his top priority, his top goal before the end of his administration is to end the war in Gaza. Right now, ceasefire talks are stalling. He's going to reiterate that they need to end the war in Gaza. He'll likely say again that he believes there is still a possibility. But what's really notable here is that Netanyahu is actually in town at the UN, but there are currently no plans for President Biden and Netanyahu to meet. That relationship, of course, very strained.
And Tom, his goal is to end the war in Gaza, and yet this is all happening against the backdrop of escalating attacks between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. So talk us through the context of where we are right now and what you're watching for today from the president.
Yeah, I think at moments like these at the United Nations, Diane, there are kind of two worlds. There's one world which the US president and other world leaders want to take us towards, and another which reflects the cold, hard reality on the ground. The world that President Biden wants to take us towards is a world in which Israel can allow tens of thousands of its own citizens to move back into their homes in northern Israel without the threat of Hezbollah rocket attacks, without actually escalating this into a wider war and potentially a ground invasion from the Israeli military into southern Lebanon. The cold, hard reality on the ground right now is that Israel is majorly escalating its attacks against Hezbollah. We're seeing the rules in this war changing, where Israel now is pursuing Hezbollah and its arsenal of weaponry and its launch sites in populated areas in southern Lebanon, in the Bekaa Valley east of Beirut. And in a way that really we haven't seen over the course of the last year. That said, and that's why we're seeing, such high civilian casualty numbers in Lebanon in the last 24, 48 hours. At the same time, there are still rules in this war. We are not yet seeing Hezbollah launch attacks using more advanced missiles and weaponry, which we believe they have, deeper into Israel. And to some extent, Israel is at least limiting its attacks in that key Hezbollah stronghold of southern Beirut. So look, the US administration will continue to press both sides to come back down, to try and dial it down, to try and keep moving towards some kind of solution on the northern border between Israel and Lebanon, where Hezbollah might move back and, find some kind of solution that could be acceptable to both sides. But look, US diplomacy can influence the situation, but within the last 24, 48 hours, we've seen military strategy, military escalation really dictate the rules, and ultimately this will be decided by the thinking both from the Israeli leadership and Hezbollah's leadership, and ultimately what goals they want to pursue.
And so again, for any viewers just joining us, President Biden is getting ready to give his last address to the UN General Assembly. Right now, we have a live look there as Brazil's president addresses the Assembly. President Biden is set to speak next. Patrick, President Biden has touted his work rallying support for Ukraine, particularly from NATO. But he's been hesitant to allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles that could hit inside Russian territory. Do you expect any announcements on that front today?
Hi, Dan. I mean, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is here in New York for the UN General Assembly and is expected to meet with President Biden in Washington later this week. And our colleague Robin Roberts interviewed Zelensky and his First Lady, Elena Zelenska, yesterday. That interview aired this morning on Good Morning America, and I was at that interview. I was present. And, you know, the focus of Zelensky here is what he's calling his victory plan. And what he means by that is to strengthen Ukraine. That means militarily, economically. And he says, in the interview, he says that the idea is to strengthen Ukraine in order to force Russia to the negotiating table, to force Vladimir Putin to negotiate on Ukraine's terms, to negotiate on acceptable terms for Ukraine. I think the most notable thing that Zelensky said, though, was that he believes that peace is closer than we think, that an end to the war is closer than we think. And what he means is that if the US and other allies strengthen Ukraine now, Russia perhaps can be weakened enough to actually move to negotiations. We've already seen today, though, from the Kremlin saying that they will only end the war once Russia's goals are achieved. So I think while we are seeing both sides saying they want negotiations, in reality, they still remain far apart, Diane.
And Patrick, by strengthen Ukraine, do you think Zelensky specifically means allowing us to use these longer-range missiles?
Yeah, I think that absolutely is one of them. You know, they are asking to be allowed to use these long-range missiles to hit around 400, 500 kilometers into Russia and to try and target these bases that Russia uses to launch hundreds of glide bombs into Ukraine. We asked him yesterday, Robin asked him yesterday, we should say, what will happen if he doesn't get this? Because the White House is very concerned that this could lead to escalation. They're not also convinced of the military utility of actually hitting these targets. They're not sure that it's going to alter the war fundamentally. But Zelensky said if it doesn't happen, it will complicate things and that more Ukrainians will die, Diane.
And Selena, the White House says a big part of President Biden's legacy is also how he's managed competition with China. How do you expect him to address that?
Yeah, well, President Biden is likely going to talk about how important it is to responsibly manage this competition with China, with both China and the U.S. realizing that this relationship is just far too important to not have open lines of communication and to have messages and processes in place so that this conflict wouldn't tip into anything worse, into potentially a hot war. Now, President Biden actually does deserve a lot of credit when it comes to restoring Indo-Pacific alliances and strengthening a lot of alliances with the goal of countering China's aggression in the region. So he is bolstering the AUKUS partnership. This is the Australia, United Kingdom, and U.S. security partnership. He also was there in Vietnam when Vietnam upgraded relations with the United States to the highest diplomatic level. He also was the initiator of the trilateral, the historic trilateral with Japan, South Korea, and the United States. So all of these are really big deals, actually. These are important security partnerships, and all of this is to really counter the aggression, the military aggression that we've seen from China in the region. And these are areas that the Biden administration hopes will be long-lasting in countering China, even if the administration were to become a Trump administration.
And I want to bring in our State Department reporter, Shannon Kingston, because, Shannon, just the simple fact that the Israeli Prime Minister is going to be here and right now has no plans to meet with President Biden or Vice President Harris, what does that tell you?
Well, it really speaks to how the relationship between the U.S. and Israel has deteriorated over the course of the conflict over the last year. Now, President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu have not often seen eye to eye, but they've always had a kind of grudging respect for each other. But, you know, the failure to even get into the same room so far, there's no plans on the schedule for that to happen. It really speaks to the fracture in the relationship. We know that the countries aren't even really effectively sharing intelligence right now. It's just really deteriorated to an all-time low.
And Tom, in terms of these negotiations, what does this all do for this ongoing attempt to strike a deal for a ceasefire and a hostage deal in Gaza, and also the escalating tensions there across the northern border in Israel?
Well, I think, you know, the situation up in the north, the war, which has clearly escalated to a great deal between Hezbollah and Israel, it's clearly taking a lot of the, not only the world's attention, but a lot of the diplomatic capital that can be expended in this region. And therefore, at the moment, we're seeing a complete stall in those negotiations. I don't think there's any, prospect at the moment where we're seeing Israel change its goals in terms of the war in Gaza. And the Israeli government's been pretty clear. It still wants to further degrade Hamas. That's clearly been one of the sticking points which has led to those tensions which Shannon was just talking about. The US administration, the Israeli government have not seen eye to eye at all for the last few months. I mean, we almost forget, Diane, that the US and other partners did help broker a ceasefire in Gaza right near the beginning of the war. More than 100 hostages were freed back then. It's a distant memory. What we've seen since then from the US administration is not a lack of effort. I mean, we've seen that really kind of frantic shuttle diplomacy from Secretary Blinken, from other US officials coming here on multiple occasions to this region. We know that there have been multiple proposals on the table. I mean, ultimately, the US has very limited or limited leverage on Hamas. What I think over the last few months and weeks, it's once again shown us is that US administrations can lean on Israel, they can put pressure on Israel, but it's way more complicated than thinking that because the US supplies a lot of arms to Israel and is a massive backer of the country, it can tell an Israeli government what to do. That's just simply not the case. Israeli governments can play into US politics. We've got the US presidential election looming in November. And over the years, US administrations have often been unable ultimately to dictate what Israeli governments do when it comes to, especially when it comes to conflict in this region. That's the case in Lebanon right now. There's no sign that the US government can really exactly rein the Israelis in if they have a specific goal which they want to achieve, and they believe they have the right strategy to do it. Whether or not that's true or not remains to be the case. And the same is true for Gaza. Ultimately, there's been a lot of pressure, but ultimately the Netanyahu government has remained firm to what it perceives to be its goal of degrading Hamas, something that the US and many other countries, or pretty much every country around the world, rejects. They believe that the best way to get peace in the region is to end the war in Gaza, get the hostages out, and then Israel can work to, find a security solution for Gaza and work out what it does vis-a-vis fighting Hamas going forward.
Shannon, to Tom's point, there is no lack of effort on the Biden administration's part, but they have been working to de-escalate there since October 7th. And now we are hearing from President Biden. He's about to speak again for the final time before the UN General Assembly, and the war in Gaza is sure to be part of that speech. Let's listen in to the president.
This is the fourth time I've had the great honor of speaking to this assembly as President of the United States. It'll be my last. I've seen a remarkable sweep of history. I was first elected to office in the United States of America as a U.S. Senator in 1972. Now, I know I look like I'm only 40. I know that. I was 29 years old. Back then, we were living through an inflection point, a moment of tension and uncertainty. The world was divided by the Cold War. The Middle East was headed toward war. America was at war in Vietnam. At that point, the longest war in America's history. Our country was divided and angry, and there were questions about our staying power and our future. But even then, I entered public life not out of despair, but out of optimism. The United States and the world got through that moment. It wasn't easy or simple without significant setbacks. But we go on to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons through arms control, and then go on to bring the Cold War itself to an end. Israel and Egypt went to war, but then forged a historic peace. We ended the war in Vietnam. The last year in Hanoi, I met with the Vietnamese leadership. We elevated our partnership to the highest level. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for reconciliation. That today, the United States and Vietnam are partners and friends. And it's proof that even from the horrors of war, there's a way forward. Things can get better. We should never forget that. I've seen that throughout my career. In the 1980s, I spoke out against apartheid in South Africa. And then I watched the racist regime fall. In the 1990s, I worked to hold Milosevic accountable for war crimes. He was held accountable. At home, I wrote and passed the Violence Against Women Act to end the scourge of violence against women and girls, not only in America, but across the world, as many of you have as well. But we have so much more to do, especially against rape and sexual violence as weapons of war and terror. We were attacked on 9/11 by al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. We brought him justice. Then I came to the presidency at another moment of crisis and uncertainty. I believed America had to look forward. New challenges, new threats, new opportunities were in front of us. We needed to put ourselves in a position to see the threats, to deal with the challenges, and to seize the opportunities as well. We need to end the era of war that began on 9/11. As Vice President to President Obama, he asked me to work to wind down the military operations in Iraq, and we did, painful as it was. When I came to office as president, Afghanistan had replaced Vietnam as America's longest war. I was determined to end it, and I did. It was a hard decision, but the right decision. 4 American presidents had faced that decision, but I was determined not to leave it to the 5th. It was a decision accompanied by tragedy. 13 brave Americans lost their lives, along with hundreds of Afghans in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think of them every day. I think of all the 2,461 U.S. military deaths over a long 20 years of that war. 20,744 American servicemen wounded in action. I think of their service, their sacrifice, and their heroism. I know other countries lost their own men and women fighting alongside us. We honor their sacrifices as well. To face the future, I was also determined to rebuild my country's alliances and partnerships to a level not previously seen. We did just that, from traditional treaty alliances to new partnerships like the Quad with the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. I know many look at the world today and see difficulties and react with despair, but I do not. I won't. As leaders, we don't have the luxury. I recognize the challenges from Ukraine to Gaza to Sudan and beyond. War, hunger, terrorism, brutality, record displacement of people, a climate crisis, democracy at risk, strains within our societies, the promise of artificial intelligence and its significant risk. The list goes on. But maybe because all I've seen and all we have done together over the decades, I have hope. I know there is a way forward. In 1919, the Irish poet William Butler Yeats described a world, and I quote, "where things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world," end of quote. Some may say those words describe the world not just in 1919, but in 2024. But I see a critical distinction. In our time, the center has held. Leaders and people from every region and across the political spectrum have stood together, turned the page. We turned the page in the worst pandemic in a century. We made sure COVID no longer controls our lives. We defended the UN Charter and ensured the survival of Ukraine as a free nation. My country made the largest investment in climate, clean energy, ever anywhere in history. There will always be forces that pull our countries apart and the world apart. Aggression, extremism, chaos, and cynicism. A desire to retreat from the world and go it alone. Our task, our test, is to make sure that the forces holding us together are stronger than those that are pulling us apart. That the principles of partnership that we came here each year to uphold can withstand the challenges that the center holds once again. My fellow leaders, I truly believe we're at another inflection point in world history, where the choices we make today will determine our future for decades to come. Will we stand behind the principles that unite us? Will we stand firm against aggression? Will we end the conflicts that are raging today? Will we take on global challenges like climate change, hunger, and disease? Will we plan now for the opportunities and risk of a revolutionary new technologies? I want to talk today about each of these decisions and the actions, in my view, we must take. To start, each of us in this body has made a commitment to the principles of the UN Charter to stand up against aggression. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we could have stood by and merely protested. But Vice President Harris and I understood that that was an assault on everything this institution was supposed to stand for. And so, my direction, America stepped into the breach, providing massive security and economic and humanitarian assistance. Our NATO allies and partners in 50-plus nations stood up as well. But most importantly, the Ukrainian people stood up. I asked the people of this chamber to stand up for them. The good news is Putin's war has failed and at his core aim. He set out to destroy Ukraine, but Ukraine is still free. He set out to weaken NATO, but NATO is bigger, stronger, and more united than ever before, with 2 new members, Finland and Sweden. But we cannot let up. The world now has another choice to make. Will we sustain our support to help Ukraine win this war and preserve its freedom, or walk away and let aggression be renewed and a nation be destroyed? I know my answer. We cannot grow weary. We cannot look away. And we will not let up on our support for Ukraine, not until Ukraine wins a just and durable peace in the UN Charter. We also need to uphold our principles as we seek to responsibly manage the competition with China so it does not veer into conflict. We stand ready to cooperate on urgent challenges for the good of our people and the people everywhere. We recently resumed cooperation with China to stop the flow of deadly synthetic narcotics. I appreciate the collaboration. It matters for the people of my country and many others around the world. On matters of conviction, the United States is unabashed, pushing back against unfair economic competition, against military coercion of other nations in the South China Sea, and maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits, and protecting our most advanced technologies so they cannot be used against us or any of our partners. At the same time, we're going to continue to strengthen our network of alliances and partnerships across the Indo-Pacific. These partnerships are not against any nation. They're building blocks for a free, open, secure, and peaceful Indo-Pacific. We're also working to bring greater measure of peace and stability to the Middle East. The world must not flinch from the horrors of October 7th. Any country would have the right and responsibility to ensure that such an attack can never happen again. Thousands of armed Hamas terrorists invaded a sovereign state, slaughtering and massacring more than 1,200 people, including 46 Americans, in their homes and at a music festival. Despicable acts of sexual violence, 250 innocents taken hostage. I've met with the families of those hostages. I've grieved with them. They're going through hell. Innocent civilians in Gaza are also going through hell. Thousands and thousands kills, including aid workers. Too many families dislocated, crowding into tents, facing a dire humanitarian situation. They did not ask for this war that Hamas started. I put forward with Qatar and Egypt a ceasefire and hostage deal. It's been endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, ensure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war. On October 7th, since October 7th, we've also been determined to prevent a wider war that engulfs the entire region. Hezbollah, unprovoked, joined the October 7th attack, launching rockets into Israel. Almost a year later, too many on each side of the Israeli-Lebanon border remain displaced. A full-scale war is not in anyone's interest. Even if the situation has escalated, a diplomatic solution is still possible. In fact, it remains the only path to lasting security to allow the residents from both countries to return to their homes and the border safely. And that's what we're working tirelessly to achieve. As we look ahead, we must also address the rise of violence against innocent Palestinians on the West Bank and set the conditions for a better future, including a two-state solution where Israel enjoys security and peace and full recognition and normalized relations with all its neighbors, where Palestinians live in security, dignity, and self-determination in a state of their own. Progress toward peace will put us in a stronger position to deal with the ongoing threat posed by Iran. Together, we must deny oxygen to its terrorist proxies, which have called for more October 7th and ensure that Iran will never, ever obtain a nuclear weapon. Gaza is not the only conflict that deserves our outrage. In Sudan, a bloody civil war unleashed one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. 8 million on the brink of famine. Hundreds of thousands already there. Atrocities in Darfur and elsewhere. The United States has led the world in providing humanitarian aid to Sudan. And with our partners, we've led diplomatic talks to try to silence the guns and avert a wider famine. The world needs to stop arming the generals, to speak with one voice and tell them, stop tearing your country apart, stop blocking aid to the Sudanese people, end this war now. But people need more than the absence of war. They need a chance to live in dignity. They need to be protected from the ravages of climate change, hunger, and disease. Our administration has invested over $150 billion to make progress and other sustainable development goals. It includes $20 billion for food security, over $50 billion for global health. We've mobilized billions more in private sector investment. We've taken the most ambitious climate action in history. We've moved to rejoin the Paris Agreement on day one. And today, my country is finally on track to cut emissions in half by 2030. On track to honor my pledge to quadruple climate financing to developing nations with $11 billion thus far this year. We've rejoined the World Health Organization, donating nearly 700 million doses of COVID vaccine to 117 countries. We must now move quickly to face Mpox outbreak in Africa. We're prepared to commit $500 million to help African countries prevent and respond to Mpox and to donate 1 million doses of Mpox vaccine now. We call on our partners to match our pledge and make this a billion-dollar commitment to the people of Africa. Beyond the core necessities of food and health, the United States, the G7, and our partners have embarked on an ambitious initiative to mobilize and deliver significant finance to the developing world. We're working to help countries build out their infrastructure, to clean energy transition, to their digital transformation, to lay new economic foundations for a prosperous future. It's called the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. We've already started to see the fruits of this emerge in Southern Africa and Southeast Asia and in the Americas. We have to keep it going. I want to get things done together. In order to do that, we must build a stronger, more effective, and more inclusive United Nations. The UN needs to adapt and bring new voices and new perspectives. That's why we support reforming and expanding the membership of the UN Security Council. My UN ambassador just laid out our detailed vision to reflect today's world, not yesterday's. It's time to move forward. The Security Council, like the UN itself, needs to go back to the job of making peace, of brokering deals to end wars and suffering. And to stop the spread of the most dangerous weapons, of stabilizing troubled regions in East Africa, from East Africa to Haiti, to Kenya-led mission that's working alongside the Haitian people to turn the tide. We also have a responsibility to prepare our citizens for the future. We'll see more technological change, I argue, in the next 2 to 10 years than we have in the last 50 years. Artificial intelligence is going to change our ways of life, our ways of work, and our ways of war. It could usher in scientific progress at a pace never seen before, and much of it could make our lives better. But AI also brings profound risks, from deep fakes to disinformation, to novel pathogens, to bioweapons. We've worked at home and abroad to define the new norms and standards. This year, we achieved the first ever General Assembly resolution on AI to start developing global rules of the road. We also announced a declaration on the responsible use of AI, joined by 60 countries in this chamber. But let's be honest, this is just the tip of the iceberg, what we need to do to manage this new technology. Nothing is certain about how AI will evolve or how it will be deployed. No one knows all the answers. My fellow leaders, it's with humility I offer 2 questions. First, how do we as an international community govern AI? As countries and companies race to uncertain frontiers, we need an equally urgent effort to ensure AI's safety, security, and trustworthiness. As AI grows more powerful, it also must grow more responsive to our collective needs and values. Benefits of all must be shared equitably. It should be harnessed to narrow, not deepen, digital divides. Second, will we ensure that AI supports rather than undermines the core principles that human life has value and all humans deserve dignity? We must make certain that the awesome capabilities of AI will be used to uplift and empower everyday people, not to give dictators more powerful shackles on the human spirit. In the years ahead, there may well be no greater test of our leadership than how we deal with AI. Let me close with this. Even as we navigate so much change, one thing must not change. We must never forget who we're here to represent. We, the people. These are the first words of our Constitution, the very idea of America. They inspired the opening words of the UN Charter. I made the preservation of democracy the central cause of my presidency. This summer, I faced a decision whether to seek a second term as president. It was a difficult decision. Being president has been the honor of my life. There's so much more I want to get done. As much as I love the job, I love my country more. I decided after 50 years of public service, it's time for a new generation of leadership to take my nation forward. My fellow leaders, let us never forget, some things are more important than staying in power. It's your people. It's your people that matter the most. Never forget, We are here to serve the people, not the other way around, because the future will be won by those who unleash the full potential of their people, to breathe free, to think freely, to innovate, to educate, to live and love openly without fear. That's the soul of democracy. It does not belong to any one country. I've seen it all around the world, and the brave men and women who ended apartheid, brought down the Berlin Wall, fight today for freedom and justice and dignity. We saw it, that universal yearning for rights and freedom in Venezuela, where millions cast their vote for change that hadn't been recognized. But it can't be denied. The world knows the truth. We saw it in Uganda, LGBT activists demanding safety and recognition of their common humanity. We see it in citizens across the world peacefully choosing their future. From Ghana to India to South Korea, nations representing 1/4 of humanity who will hold elections this year alone. It's remarkable, the power of we the people, that makes me more optimistic about the future than I've ever been. Since I was first elected to the United States Senate in 1972, every age faces its challenges. I saw it as a young man. I see it today. But we are stronger than we think. We're stronger together than alone. And what the people call impossible is just an illusion. Nelson Mandela taught us, and I quote, "It always seems impossible until it's done. It always seems impossible until it's done." My fellow leaders, there is nothing that's beyond our capacity if we work together. Let's work together. God bless you all, and may God protect all those who seek peace. Thank you.
We've just been watching President Biden give his final speech before the United Nations General Assembly. The president compared the current moment to when he was first elected to the U.S. Senate in 1972, saying the world is at an inflection point in history now as it was then. He recounted some major moments from his long career, noting the U.S. and Vietnam are now partners and friends, saying that even the horrors of war show there's a way forward. The president defended the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, calling it a hard decision, but the right one. He also touted his administration's accomplishments taking on climate change and hunger and standing up to Russian aggression. Biden says Putin's war has failed and NATO is stronger today than it was before the invasion. He asked world leaders whether they would sustain support for Ukraine or walk away and let it be destroyed. And the president also addressed the expanding war in the Middle East and his administration's work to negotiate a ceasefire, saying now is the time for the parties to finalize terms, bring the hostages home, and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas's grip. He also ended the speech toward the end talking about his decision to step down in the race for the White House, saying we must all remember who we are here to represent, the people, and saying as much as I love the job, I love my country more. I want to go to senior White House correspondent Selena Wang to start us off here. Selena, how significant is this moment for President Biden giving his final speech to world leaders at the UN when just a few months ago he was running for a second term?
This is a really bittersweet moment for President Biden. And I think that quote you mentioned just then, that was a really powerful moment. And it was a rare, candid point in that speech when he talked about stepping down from this race and passing on the torch, that he loves his country more than keeping power. And he really took that to the more than 100 global leaders who were there in the audience, saying that you should also remember that this is about the people. This is not about holding on to power. And in terms of why this is bittersweet, it's not just that it's capping off his more than 50 years in public service. He also knows that there's a lot he still wanted to accomplish. He had a lot of goals, and the possibility of reaching those goals are now dimming, including the war in Ukraine still raging, as well as trying to reach that ceasefire deal in Gaza. He made a very forceful statement there saying that the war needs to end. They need to agree to a ceasefire deal. But the reality is that U.S. efforts to negotiate that ceasefire deal so far have not come to fruition. And President Biden there in the speech, he also notably touched on and he acknowledged the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. That was largely seen as a disastrous withdrawal. But President Biden, he was suggesting that history will look positively on his decision, on his determination to end that long war in Afghanistan, talking about that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. So, but overall, Diane, this was really a quintessential President Biden speech. He acknowledged all of the tragedy and wars raging, but he ended on a message of hope that he believes there's still a way forward through alliances and through working together.
Yeah, big message from hope and unity today throughout that speech from the president. I want to bring in ABC's Patrick Reevell, who covers Russia and Ukraine for us also, because this was a big focus of this speech. Patrick, no surprise. You hear the president here saying that Russia's war has failed, that they set out to destroy Ukraine. Ukraine still stands. They set out to weaken NATO. NATO now has 2 more members than it did before this war started. So what's at stake here for President Biden's message when it comes to calling on these leaders not to back down now, not to lose that faith and that strength, and to stick it through to support Ukraine to the end?
Yeah, Diane, I think we saw that Ukraine was top of Biden's agenda here at the UN. You know, he made this impassioned plea for the world to keep supporting Ukraine and not to falter now, saying we can't grow weary, we can't look away. And I think it was striking that his rhetoric did resemble what we've seen from President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is here this week, who is making a very similar plea, saying that he has a victory plan, and that victory plan is simply to strengthen Ukraine, to eventually force Russia to negotiate for a just peace. And what we heard from President Biden was that the world should stand with Ukraine to push for a just and durable peace. And it's notable, I think, that there was applause in the hall of the UN there when he made this call, and when he called for countries to basically defend the UN Charter, because, of course, the UN was founded to prevent wars. But I think the other thing, though, of course, is that when he's calling for this commitment, perhaps the biggest questions right now are around the US's own commitment, because not only are we seeing that the Ukrainians are pushing the US and the Biden administration to provide weapons, for example, and that the Biden administration so far has been unwilling to do it, but there are a lot of criticisms coming from in Ukraine, but also within the US, that the Biden administration doesn't seem to have a plan to keep Ukraine more than just in the fight, but to actually try and win and try and put pressure properly on Russia, because we're seeing Russia right now advancing again in eastern Ukraine. And then, of course, looming over all of this is a possible second Trump presidency. You know, President Trump has said just in the past couple of weeks that he declined to say whether he wants Ukraine to win. J.D. Vance, his running mate, has said that he believes Ukraine should give up territory to Russia and that they should abandon NATO membership, which is something that President Zelensky is asking for here. And, you know, President Zelensky has said he's going to meet with President Biden, with Vice President Harris. He said he also hopes to meet with President Trump. But I think, this question that is looming over all of this is this uncertainty of what will come when the US election happens. And, of course, that is going to determine so much of these conflicts around the world, Diane.
And, of course, the other thing looming over the Biden presidency is the war in Gaza and now the conflict in Lebanon. I want to bring in foreign correspondent Tom Soufi-Burridge, who's in Tel Aviv, looking at that part of this. Tom, President Biden says his administration is working tirelessly toward a solution. They want residents of Israel and Lebanon and Gaza to all be able to return to their homes safely. But this is similar language to what we've heard since the October 7th attack. So what's the latest on the conflict, particularly the escalation over the northern border with Hezbollah and Lebanon, and where does this go from here?
Yeah, just firstly on the speech, Diane, in terms of the Middle East, I think this for President Biden was, in terms of the Middle East, was more a speech about aspirations, not achievements. That was almost inevitable. The aspiration to end the war in Gaza, saying now is the time for the sides to finalize the deal. We had applause for that point. Inevitably, there's a consensus within the UN that the war needs to end, but ultimately that's proved elusive, and there's no sign that that's going to change any time before President Biden leaves office. And also, of course, the aspiration that the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in the north and in southern Lebanon does not turn into a much wider regional conflict. Look, in a way, it has already been moving in that direction within the last 24, 48 hours. The latest, as you asked me, is that we're seeing, close to 600 people killed, according to Lebanese officials, within the last 2 days. That is the deadliest day in Lebanon in decades. And, we're seeing Israel changing its rules in terms of going after Hezbollah sites, what it says are missile launch sites, weapons storage sites in southern Lebanon, in the northeast, in built-up civilian areas. Israel wasn't really doing that so much. It now is doing that quite blatantly and deliberately, saying that it has to take out Hezbollah's ability to strike Israel in order to return citizens to the north. I mean, look, as you said, President Biden couldn't tell us much new, really, in terms of the Middle East. If you look over the course of the last year, the Middle East has become a much more unpredictable and dangerous place. You know, that isn't obviously entirely down to US policy. I mean, in some senses, the US back in April, you know, that amazing coalition that the US brought together when Iran fired that massive barrage of rockets and missiles at Israel, the US led that coalition and really helped to dial down the possibility of a major war in this region between the two prime military powers, Iran and Israel. So, you know, President Biden didn't mention that. I thought that was interesting. In a way, that's probably the US's biggest achievement over the last few months. I mean, there was a ceasefire in Gaza early in the war. More than 100 hostages were released back then. That's a distant memory right now. And really, you know, the US has pressured Israel. It has tried to, via other mediators, pressure Hamas, but really there hasn't been much tangible achievement in terms of the war in Gaza, in terms of US and other international diplomacy to try and dial that down. And ultimately, that's why I think President Biden could only really repeat the aspirations of his administration going into this kind of final stage of his presidency, rather than list, you know, more impressive achievements.
And foreign correspondent Marcus Moore is in Beirut. So, Marcus, I want to take this point to you because one of those aspirations was President Biden saying that a diplomatic solution is possible between Israel and these forces in Lebanon, Hezbollah, that they have been in conflict for a while. How realistic does that seem at this point?
Well, Diane, as the president was saying that a diplomatic solution is the only solution, we were hearing the sounds of explosions happening here along the coast. Certainly, in our conversations with U.S. officials at the embassy here, we've also spoken with officials with the French embassy here in Beirut. Everyone has talked about the need for a diplomatic solution, that the sides have to keep talking to avert a wider war, which is something so many have been concerned about. But I think it's critically important to point out or to home in on the point that, at least here in Lebanon, and as it relates to Hezbollah, that there has to be a ceasefire in Gaza. They don't see the conflict here in southern Lebanon and northern Israel as being separate from the fighting that we've seen in Gaza. And so as long as that fighting continues, that we'll continue to see the fight here. As you know, Hezbollah has vowed to continue hitting targets in northern Israel as long as the bombardment continues in Gaza. And so, Diane, it's notable. Today has been very active. Perhaps not as intense as yesterday, but still quite busy and deadly as well. We've heard from the Ministry of Health that as many as 6 people were killed in a recent strike in southern Beirut just today. 15 people were injured, and these strikes continue not only here in Beirut, but as you know, farther south in southern Lebanon, in the areas of Tyre and along the border. And in the midst of that, people have still been trying to evacuate the homes and villages in those areas and have gone to shelters or have gone to relatives' homes. But we are still hearing the stories, Diane, of airstrikes happening as those people were trying to evacuate, and also, sadly, the loss of their loved ones in the midst of these operations.
And I want to bring in State Department reporter Shannon Kingston, because, Shannon, I also found it interesting the president naming Iran by name, saying specifically, talking about their role here and the critical nature of keeping a nuclear weapon away from Iran. What did you make of that part of the speech and this sort of overall theme?
Absolutely. It's something the president probably could have emphasized more, because it is a success that they've had. The fact that Iran hasn't fully entered the fray here in the conflict in the Middle East. Now, of course, Iran is still making progress towards the development of a nuclear weapon. The administration has warned that they could have enough fissile material to do that in just weeks. Indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran have been broken down for some time, so it is a problem looming on the horizon. But overall, we saw President Biden. He did really bring the room back to the horrors of Hamas's attack on October 7th. He tried to remind the world why we're seeing this conflict between Israel and Hamas and Israel and Hezbollah. But what we didn't hear was that full-throated vow that the U.S. would uphold Israel's defense at any cost. That's something that has become almost boilerplate language for these kinds of addresses, and something he has said in previous speeches to the UN. Now, he did still give plenty of points that Israel would like in that speech, but most of this work towards de-escalation is going to happen away from the spotlight in private meetings.
And ABC News national security defense analyst Mick Mulroy, of course, a lot of the more concrete parts of plans like this do come out in those private meetings, to Shannon's point. But standing before the world stage, this is the last time he'll address the UN General Assembly. Do you think the president did enough here to lay out concrete plans and call out concrete, requests and demands for that matter, as opposed to aspirations?
Diane, what really struck me is you really laid out the case for why the United States is that indispensable nation, the leader of the free world, supporting Ukraine against the invasion of Russia at a time when they're about to present their plan for victory this week at the UN. That was very important to retain and remain that steadfast supporter of Ukraine. And he also talked about what the United States is doing to prevent an all-out, full-scale conflict in the Middle East. Very difficult. Both sides seem to be dug in, but the United States is the one country in the world that could essentially affect a diplomatic solution, which is the best solution in this issue. One place where he might get challenged is how history will view the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. The Taliban has essentially reneged on every part of its agreement, including on human rights, where women and girls are now almost erased from society. But I would also point out that he highlighted the war in Sudan, which does not get a lot of attention. There's around 25 million people, so half of the population there, that is on the verge of starvation. And it's important for the United States to do that because we talk about it, the world talks about it. So I do think he did lay out this overall vision for where the United States should be in leading the free world. It's not going to go into details. That's not what speeches are like this. That does happen behind the scenes when countries to countries and staffs to staff start talking about how they can actually do the things that the president lays out as his strategic vision.
So, Selena, his final address to the UN General Assembly, what do you think this speech does for President Biden's legacy?
Well, I think it cements him as someone who was rebuilding America's global alliances, someone who took America's leadership back to the global stage after those turbulent years of the Trump administration. But I think there are going to be three key issues that are going to overshadow a lot of his achievements: the chaotic Afghanistan withdrawal, which Mick Mulroy just mentioned, the Ukraine war still raging, as well as what's happened in the Middle East. He has clearly made the case for why American leadership is absolutely critical, why alliances are critical, yet there are also limits to that global leadership. But again, President Biden has always been an incredibly optimistic person. Even in the darkest of times, he has always portrayed a message of hope, that there's a way forward, and that's something that we heard again today. He said despite hunger, disease, wars, questions about artificial intelligence, reflecting on his long career, his long life, he has seen America and the world recover time and time again from those dark moments.
All right, Selena, Patrick, Tom, Marcus, Shannon, and Mick, thank you all. Coming up, the CEO of a leading drug maker's in the hot seat, why Ozempic and Wegovy's under scrutiny and facing questions from lawmakers on Capitol Hill.
Amanda Riley was a mother, wife.
Everybody loved her.
I heard the words, "You have stage 3 blood cancer."
We gave our hearts, our prayers.
We thought she was God's gift, but she was a liar.
Why would somebody fake cancer?
There's all these pictures of her in the hospital with IVs, tubing. It was only a matter of time until Amanda's whole world came tumbling down.
Oh my God!
Scamanda premieres October 9th on ABC and stream on Hulu.
She had this captivating smile and these beautiful eyes, and I prayed that they would find her alive.
Her car was found abandoned.
You find keys in this car that don't seem to belong to her.
That was just the beginning.
Oh my God.
A local woman who says she sometimes has visions.
I could see blood.
I get goosebumps. This case touched you like no other had. Why?
Because I know how much black girls don't matter.
All new 2020 Friday night on ABC.
Hey, good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? They are ready. covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning. You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too. I'll be here.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Michael, George, Clara, Ginger.
Welcome back to ABC News Live. First, the CEO of a company that makes Ozempic and Wegovy set to testify on Capitol Hill today. The drug maker is accused of, quote, ripping off Americans with high prices for the drugs while making billions. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze has the details. Elizabeth?
Hey, Diane, an influential Senate committee wants to know why those popular weight loss and obesity drugs cost so much more in the U.S. than they do in other countries. Ozempic, which is made by the drug maker Novo Nordisk, the price of that in the U.S. is $969 per month. In Canada, you can get it for $155 per month, and in Germany, it's only $59. For Americans with obesity, the price for Wegovy is even higher, more than $1,300 monthly. After insurance and rebates, the price that people pay at the pharmacy counter is typically much less. But the committee chairman, Senator Bernie Sanders, is accusing the drug maker of ripping off Americans while reaping nearly $50 billion in sales alone from Wegovy and Ozempic. In his testimony, the CEO of Novo Nordisk is expected to point to the high cost of developing and manufacturing the drugs. The company says 90% of Americans with insurance pay less than $50 out of pocket, but lawmakers want those prices to be even lower. And this comes as new data is out this morning from the CDC showing that obesity rates have ticked slightly down in the U.S., but they're still up over the past 10 years. More than 100 million Americans total now have obesity, and those with severe obesity, the rates of that have been steadily